What's Alex?
What's Alex saying?
He said, I feel mostly good about my script and feel solid about my Sig Bev.
Nice. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Competition season.
And that's the
goes.
news, folks. Competition season is upon us.
There it is. Serge, you're competing in tasters and brewers.
Correct.
Tasters first time.
Both first time.
Both
I guess
time.
Brewers first time. I did like a local Brewers comp back in Social Grounds.
Gotcha.
But it was very local, fairly small. I think there was only 6 or 5 competitors. So 2 judges. So yeah.
Cool. And tasters.
Yeah. Tasters for the first time. Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. I'm super stoked on tasters because it is the most objective competition. Like there is no judging. Like unless you do something stupid, like touch the table wrong, which is kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Like you can't touch anything or you can't pick up a cup. Nothing. You just slurp and you decide, move a cup forward. And that's it. Like I had a very good run through where I went 6 for 6 and 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which for me is good. That's not national time. Like last year, the guy from Olympia got sub 2. And like that's insane. That's quick. That's ripping. That's and 100% accuracy. Yeah. That's shredding, dude. Like I'll get there, but so far like I made a lot of progress. Like there's been days where I would cup coffees for 2 hours out of speed at different temps, like gauging every single temp from like hot to cold, and then easy slurping over 300 times. You know, it's insane. There's times where I like borderline threw up at training, gagging, because I'm spitting. I'm not, of course, I've spit more than like 2 or 3 16 pint glasses of spit. It's intense. It's a lot, but it's also like a very fun competition because there is no judging. Sometimes I'm so fed up with judging because it's so subjective.
Right. And it is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's purely skill too. You don't have to, like, there's a skill in presenting, but presenting, it's like you have to be somewhat of a good communicator. You can't just be a good stellar barista.
Yeah.
You kind of have to know how to put words together and talk about it, you know.
Here I just slap on my headphones.
Yeah. And you're
and
cruising.
I'm like, I'm going to rip. Yeah. So
interesting. Well, by the time this episode gets released, we'll already know pretty much, because you're, as of this recording, you're flying out in a few days. Yeah. For that, so folks, you'll probably end up knowing by the time this episode rolls
that
out.
Wave, dude, that went overboard. Embarrassing. That's bad.
Getting wild.
We're getting wild. This coffee better be that wild.
For some reason, I ran out of coffees. I don't have any coffees in here other than old roasts that are either not good roasts or so. We're just rolling with what we have.
One thing about this coffee, it always fascinates me that this is a semi-washed. Right? Or am I crazy?
I don't know.
I think this is semi-washed.
Why does that fascinate you?
Because it's intense.
But that's what
it's more intense than the natural we had on the other episode.
Yeah, I didn't like this roast out of the couple roasts that we did that day. Hence why it's still here. Mm-hmm. But it's still it's got this candied fruit, almost picking up some blueberry. Somebody told me who drank this coffee also picked up blueberry, talked about it. I was like, yeah, I can back that up. I love this coffee, honestly. Probably one of my favorites that we've had. Yeah. It's fun.
I like it. I'm still on the Agaro train. Someone DM'd me today and said, hey, what coffee, if you were to buy coffees from your website, what coffee would you buy? I said Agaro.
I always tell everybody to buy the Cordoba.
Yeah, of course
Colombia,
you do.
So yeah. Careful who you ask, friends. But yeah, it's stellar. This is the Colombian Colombia Huela from Ildefonso Cordoba, Pink Bourbon. You know, what more could you say? Yeah.
A lot of flavor, a lot of big juicy acidity. again, if you listen to the last episode, because this is a follow-up,
Mm-hmm.
which we're going to like dissect into, origin and roasting and brewing.
Yeah.
This is, I would say, a great coffee to probably brew on a flat base brewer.
How come?
Yeah, because the crispy acidity just
okay.
pops. Like,
Or
pops.
an
Again,
extracted V60.
again, I'm not trying to make these abstract, like,
Right.
remember for a while, like, okay, I'm going to shut up now. I'm not going to say anything about different grinders and different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
there's some truth to it, like, but you're
Go to
like,
lab suites.
you're picking. Yeah. Yeah. That's one. That's fun. That's wonderful. Anyways, yeah. So if you haven't listened to the episode right before this, I think you should, because it's kind of a follow up, part 2. And in this episode, as opposed to last one, which we talked about the V60, the cone shape versus flat brew, we kind of want to go I guess maybe deeper into that, or like a subreddit of that, which is like, how do you adjust, do you adjust your recipe for pour overs, not only based on of your brewer type, but also origin, or even processing.
Yep.
Take it that far, because I know, man, there's so many forums that I'm on, and that people are like, oh, I like naturals brewed at 10 degrees cooler, and I'm like, sure, great.
Yeah.
But so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also we want to touch upon not just brewing and how origin affects that, but also roasting and how origin affects that. Because at this point, we've roasted, a wide variety, anything from, Southeast Asian, Indonesian, to some African coffees, Central American, all that jazz. So, yeah, anything
Flash roasted Tanzanian pea berry.
That's true. That's true. We had a Tanzania pea berry. That's great.
We never launched that coffee, y'all.
Yeah,
We're just
that's
kidding.
exclusive.
Yeah.
It's an employee
Yeah.
exclusive. So to have that, you have to be an
I
employee.
think I roasted it just to drink and pour latte art in.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that's great. But yeah, so any thoughts on that, or we can just get right into it, and you tell me, do you adjust your pour over recipe based off of origin?
I mentioned that in the earlier episode. Yeah, like I do for sure. Ethiopian coffees, a lot of African coffees, I do like to add more water, just simply because coffees that are more dense require a little more firepower. So I add a little more water. I'm sorry, dude. That was my foot. But Mark is out here playing footsie with me under the table. Like, I'm trying to record, dude. Calm down. Dude,
Need a bigger table, I swear.
definitely do. With that said, like, it's also hard because, for example, Colombia has such a wide variety of coffees. It's also hard to just have this easy answer to be like, all Colombian coffees should be brewed to a 1-16. That's just not true. I like, for example, Sweet Valley from Manhattan is like, it draws down so quick.
Yes,
and
yes,
it doesn't, and it's a natural. Maybe that's part of it too. It just does not require that much of contact time, which is fine. It still tastes like Sweet Valley should taste like, but it doesn't. You're not brewing at like 4 minutes. There's other coffees from Manhattan, also from Colombia, that, for example, the El Preso decaf. That coffee almost always extracts at 4 minutes plus.
Yeah,
and also it clogs.
Yeah.
Like, because that's also has to do with processing, the EA sugarcane process, like, and it's a natural, like it takes a lot, or it's a whole different coffee to brew, not takes a lot. So, and usually even that kind of coffee, I will go to as far as brewing it with less water and then diluting it. So I can still get the extraction and then punch in a little bit more water post brew just to get the strength nice. So yeah, you definitely adjust according to processing. Decaf is a method of processing. And then when it comes to natural and washed, I kind of, like you were saying, start with the base recipe according to the origin. The origin is probably one of the major things I adjust to. And then I go from there. I can't with full confidence say like, all naturals should be extracted over X amount of time. Again, time is not what we're controlling here. Time is a variable that helps us maintain consistency and the same results. So if I tell you, hey, I brewed this coffee at 3 minutes and 20 seconds with this recipe, that's something for you to follow. That doesn't mean that brew is dialed. I think a lot of the times in these kind of conversations, like, we talk about time as if it's this exclusive variable that we need to manage and control. We're managing all the variables, and time just gives us that readout. That's kind of a sub thing, but I will adjust the recipe to different origins.
So you mentioned you're adjusting water input. You're also probably adjusting a little bit of grind size, maybe.
Of course.
Are you adjusting anything else? Are you adjusting flow rate? Are you adjusting your pouring technique? Are you doing 4 pulses instead of 5, instead of, whatever, 3? Are you extending bloom time, or are those things you're keeping the same? Give us a little bit of a rundown on that.
Yeah. It depends on the context. If I'm brewing at home, right? A lot of this also has to do, like, are we talking about like cafes, or are we talking about just home experimentation?
Just home for now,
for sure.
So looking for the best cup of coffee.
At home, like, I usually adjust a lot, just because I can. Like, I don't need to worry about pulses because I'm brewing 1 cup single for me. If I'm at the cafe, I'm brewing 2 cups, and I need to make sure my pulses are lined up with one another, 100%, right?
Yeah.
So, and with that said, like, with a flat base brewer, I want to pulse more. When it comes to origin and when it comes to different varieties of coffees, I'm not like, I don't know. I will play with it just for fun, because those are such micro tweaks. Like, the big ones are dose, the water input, and then your grind size. That's like your 3 big ones. Everything is just like this minor little tweak. Of course, higher flow rate is going to basically control your drawdown time. So you're going to tweak that here and there, like, faster or slower, closer or higher. Even your stream height is going to adjust that. There's a lot happening, especially with stream height, changing the temperature of the water when it hits the slurry. That's a big one. And stream height may just push all the coffee to the bottom, and those fines will clog up the filter. It's going to slow down, right? So tweaking those things a little bit here and there will make a big difference in the cup. Now, do I do a specific thing to origin? A little bit, because, when we had that Yirgacheffe Ethiopian coffee that was clogging a lot, I do want to grind a little coarser automatically. I know that's going to happen. And then I'm going to be a little gentler. I'm probably not even going to swirl. A lot of the times, just 1 single little tap just to settle the bed. I'm trying to not move those fines. I'm trying to get them stuck on the top of the filter, whether it's flat or cone, and to make sure that the drawdown is nice and even. So stuff like flow rate is going to affect that, right? Because you don't want to create a lot of turbulence in there so that it clogs up the filter.
For sure. Interesting. And that's usually my approach when I'm, if I'm brewing anything, just like I said in the last episode, I kind of follow through with in terms of origin differences. Usually it's just like staple recipe, and then I taste and then I adjust accordingly. I rarely am adjusting flow rate. I usually have a base flow rate that I always use. Height, stream height, I have a base. Again, the only time I'm adjusting is if I'm finding myself going way too coarse. And the problem is, if you're brewing, for example, like an Ethiopian or maybe sometimes a Kenyan that clog, the difficulty there is if you go to coarse, then you might get your drawdown time, but then all of a sudden it doesn't flat. Taste as it tastes flat. So that's when I'm like, that goes to show actually though that just hitting some kind of time parameters don't always yield the right flavors that you're expecting to get out of your cup. So that's when you kind of have to intentionally be changing something else. But yeah, my theory is like, what I've been enjoying is how do we keep as many things the same as possible? I agree. Because soon as you're adjusting, you change up your ratio, you change up your dose, your water output, your flow rate, all of a sudden then your coffee's tasting way out of whack and you're like, what the heck did I, which one of those actually ended up impacting? And so usually like the more complicated a brew gets, usually the more frustrating it is for me to get a tasty cup, the more it pushes me to try different things. But it's kind of hard, when you buy 200 grams of a freaking coffee and 150 goes to dialing it in. Gosh dang it.
No, I think I 100% agree with you. And I believe it was Nate that said something along the lines of, dude, just dump some water on it and see how it tastes. And I agree with that. Like, why overcomplicate these recipes? And, are you going to have like this ruler standing next to your kettle height to make sure you're exactly at like 7 inches above the slurry? Like, you know what I mean? Why? And then again, like once you change your kettle, your flow or stream height, all of a sudden you change your flow rate, because the higher the stream, you need to pour harder. So that stream enters the slurry. Like it's like you every little variable, the more variables that you make, the more dial in you need to do, because you tweaked one, now you have to redo it. So I agree, just sticking with that. And again, when it comes to origin, the other day I brewed that one random coffee we had, Todos Los Santos. You got a slamming brew, dude. I enjoyed it so much. It was just a classic good coffee. That wasn't your competition coffee? No, that was an Onyx coffee.
That was Onyx Holiday.
Yeah, it was just solid, sweet, little bit of acidity. It came out perfect, and like I was so happy with it. I probably was happier with it than like some bonkers natural.
Speaking of the Todos Santos, it's interesting because a few people got that coffee that we roasted, which was like gifts from Onyx to other roasters, where other roasters like took a photo of it and sent it to us. Yeah. And was like, hey, you roasted this. And we just got,
Who said that?
Yeah. I think the guy, man, I'm so sorry. I forgot his name. The guy who roasts for Hatch, I think.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. So
that's dope.
I was like, okay.
Why didn't you tell me that? That makes me so happy.
And I was like, man, take it with a grain of salt, like don't be overcritical. We had minimal dial in, and it was like,
Did George Howell have our coffee?
I don't know. Maybe
I hope so.
George, good old George. But we did, everyone texted me just randomly one day and it was like, hey, there's somebody like out of California or something that owns like a good sized roasting company, and ended up telling him that how much he liked the roast and wanted roast deets on it. So I literally screenshotted the curve, sent him all the specs.
Dude, Mark, you're keeping this precious information from me, dude. This makes me so stoked, dude. That's hella dope.
So speaking of Todos Santos, but anyways, little rabbit trail. I think the biggest thing that you should probably look out for is, if you do not like your brews that you're getting right now, that's a problem. And that's when you can start adjusting any variable you want, but if you have a solid recipe that works for most coffees, literally take one thing at a time and get it to where you can get that coffee to taste good, and then you can enjoy it. That's it. Keep it simple, keep it easy. And I don't think, like, personally myself, I don't think that you need to be hopping around based off of origin. Oh my gosh, this is 100, so I'm gonna turn my kettle down 20 degrees, and it's just like, dude, just do what you always do, make some minor adjustments according to taste. If you can't taste stuff, then that's a problem of its own. That's it.
I would also add, like, at some point, it's okay to blame the roaster. Because there's been coffees that I've tried to make taste so good and I still don't like them. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? At some point you can say, like, maybe I don't like this roast of this coffee. And I think that's hard for us to say as roasters. Because we really hope that every coffee that you brew from Mir turns out exactly like, it's soluble, it's tasty, it's sweet, it hits all the expectations that you want. But it's also okay to blame us, be like, dude, like, I don't like this roast. That was a miss. Okay.
Yeah. And I think at that point, a good thing to do is, if you can't nail down a coffee, dude, just cup it.
That's true.
Cup it. And then if it's on the cupping table, if it's coming out really nice and exactly where you want it, then you're doing something wrong in the brewing. So, but that being said, you mentioned roasting. Let's shift a little bit in this last bit of the episode. are we adjusting our roasts specific to different origins?
I mean, yes and no.
Yeah,
That's a hard question
yes
to
and
answer.
no.
It's yes and no. We have a few go-tos because we don't take a curve that we roasted Guatemalan coffee and toss in an Ethiopian. We don't do that. But also one of the things that like one of the things I remember Scott saying one time was like, man, keep your systems the same. Like, and just go with it. Like if you've been roasting this way, don't change your in between batch protocol, or don't change your, heat up and warm, whatever. Like I'm just throwing out random things, but don't change a lot of things that will really affect the roast. Try to keep as many things consistent. And then again, each coffee is going to react different in a roaster. Of course, like each varietal or even react different in a roaster. Like a Ethiopian pea berry is not going to roast the same as the elephant bean. It's not. So you do have to adjust a little bit. But we do have these set goals where we want to make sure that our roasts are hitting certain parameters. And then again, those parameters are not absolutes.
Yeah. I think I totally didn't plan this, but I think it's very similar to the approach we're taking with brewing as well. Like we have, and I'm going to expand a little bit on that comment from Scott. The point is like, once you finding your system and your sweet spot where coffees are tasting good, it's probably the hardest thing. Like if you're just a new roaster, you got a new machine, you're starting off, like that is the most difficult thing. But once you've gotten there in the ballpark and you've roasted a handful of different origins, now it's kind of like all downhill from there, where all you really need to do is just adjust according to, coffees that have different moisture content level are going to roast a little different. Coffees, depending on where they are in their shelf life, are going to roast a little differently, but you're not making these insane, wild changes. You're just taking like, cool, this is like in the ballpark where we've liked our Ethiopians. We're just going to ship it there, cup, and then adjust according to what we're cupping. Right. That's it. And most of the time, like literally on this coffee that we had, you're like, hey, maybe we can just bump a little bit more DTR on it. Cool. Again, it wasn't, hey, let's restructure. Let's make this. It was just like, can we just inch it into, because we want to kind of massage it into a good place and let it go, And so, I think something I've also realized is we approach now a lot of coffees very similarly. Like a lot of coffees have kind of the same pattern and structure, with some exceptions based off of origin. But also we've also realized like, hey, naturals roast a little different than wash coffees. We realized, hey, going into crack, you can go with a natural much differently than how you're going to wash. Wash usually takes a little bit more oomph. So, you're not crashing right after crack. But naturals, you can just like coast all the way straight through. And it's like, anyways. Yeah, no, that's really good. I the other thing is, just lost my train of thought. I think that just what you said kind of sums up a lot of our approach, and that's a very good frame of reference. A lot of the times we're also like our roasts, they do kind of look the same, but that's also not like by the same. I'm saying like we always want a declining ROR. But there is no pat down answer or absolute answer to say like an Ethiopian natural should always get 16% DTR. Right. Or an Ethiopian natural should always be dropped at 410. Or there's no such thing. Like we have noticed patterns over the course of years that we like our Guatemalan coffees at a certain drop temp. We like our Guatemalan coffees with certain development. We've noticed those things, but even that is not absolute, because the way you dialed in your competition coffee was different than the way we dialed in Jorge Mendes. And then at the end of the day, we still found out that they're still similar. But there's slight differences, So stuff like that I think we always look for these absolute pat down answers. Like this coffee should have X amount of DTR, therefore tweak your roast to do this. I don't think that's an absolute answer. You know, that may be a guideline, especially if you dive through like
roasting Reddit, like there's so many whack things out there that you're like, what is going on? It's like, it's like brewing a V60. All of a sudden you have to stand on your head and pour upside down. And you're like, dude, how are you defying freaking gravity? Like, what are you doing? I don't know. I mean, keep it simple, let it roll, dude, let it cook, dude, make it taste good.
That's it. That's the name of the game. No, for sure. I think, with both brewing and roasting, at least our theory on it is like, how do we just, hopefully you can build a way of doing something that gets you 90% of the way there. Mm-hmm. And I think for somebody who's just getting into coffee, that sounds really intimidating because they don't know how to get 90% of the way there. That's where, you have to, try 20 different recipes. Like somebody on our, pour over tutorial was like, hey, why does somebody else in a different video recommend a different time? Like when you're starting off there, that's challenging. It's just not easy because you're like, what the hell do I do? Yep. There's so many different options. But, that's where I'd be like, hey, experiment, try everything. And hopefully you can actually over time, over years, get to a place where, you have a system set in place, a way of doing something where it's like, boom, you're there 85, 90% of the way there. And then you're just sitting right into the spot of, for each individual coffee. So,
by the way, this tastes like a grape Jolly Rancher right now. Yeah, it's pretty nice. Yeah. And we didn't tweak the recipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Same old, dude. Yeah.
That's it. It works. It works for like most coffees, not all.
Yeah.
But that's it, So actually, if you've been a long-term listener of the podcast, it took us like years to dial in our batch brewed recipe. And finally years, like hundreds of episodes. No.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Probably 100.
Probably 100. Yeah. Where finally now it's just like plug and play. We adjust the grind size a little bit. Of course, it's not always a hit. It's a hit or miss. But it's been a lot more hits lately. Yeah. So, any final thoughts? Any final words?
I mean, I said them earlier and I'll say them again. Keep it simple. Make it taste good. That's about it.
Fire. Well, folks, if you disagree, if you agree, we'd love to hear it down in the comments on YouTube. Send us DM, email, whatever it is, on Spotify. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it, your approach on it. But
I want to be roasted.
Roast us down in the comments. Do it, please.
Do it.
Please. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Friends, as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.